today I'd like to talk to you about a very serious subject, something that is really worrying a lot of people. The real bulk of it is heating our homes. So if we're paying somewhere around £1,700 say to heat a 3-bedroom semi, nobody knows for sure, but it's very likely that the price is going to rise to somewhere around £3,100. The bulk of that will be on home heating. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're running gas, oil, electricity, you could even have a newly installed heat pump, you will still be paying significantly more for your fuel than you were the previous year. So even if you've managed to make some economies, you've managed to put in the latest equipment, you've done a bit more with your insulation, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to make that kind of difference that soon. So whatever we do, we've all got to face this grim reality. For a lot of people, it won't be a question of heating or eating, but it'll certainly be a question of turning the heating down. This beggars a question a lot of people ask is it cheaper to leave your heating on or is it cheaper to turn it off? Now, I did address this in a previous video and I came down firmly on the side of turning your heat off. Having said that, there is a proviso. Some people would like to leave their heating on a tick over temperature, on a very low temperature. So if you've got a boiler, you can turn it down to 50 degrees centigrade flow temperature and you can leave that thing ticking over. And the idea of that is that the house warms up, it maintains the heat rather than cycling up and down, up and down. It just maintains a steady level of heat throughout, which gives you a certain amount of thermal comfort. You feel warmer because there are no cold spots in the house and you just get used to that steady heat. Really, what you've got to ask is, one thing, what the heat losses are like from your house, but the other thing is you've got to look at your lifestyle. Now, if you're elderly and you're in the house all day, I would say that you've really got hardly any choice but to run that heating for a longer period at a lower temperature. If you're going out to work, if you're only there for a sort of hour in the morning when you get up and you're all rushing off to work and you don't come back into the house until 4:30, 5 o'clock, then I would say that it's definitely worth turning that heating off or right down. And when I say right down, I'm talking about maintaining a temperature of something like 16 degrees centigrade in the house so that it will only click on just to lift it up. So when you come home, the heating hasn't got as much work to do. Now with the gas boiler, because they're so responsive, because we can whack a lot of heat in there, we can turn up the flow temperature on them. To me, it makes sense to turn your heating off and then turn it on, or have it timed to turn on just before you come in. You can get a very rapid rise on the heating. You can start to turn that boiler off a bit sooner because you've got a high level of heat there, you've got high flow temperatures, you've heated the house up. You can turn the heating off, say at 9 o'clock, 9:30, and the thing will start cooling down. And if you're going to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock, then you should be fine. Your bedroom should still be warm unless you've got the windows open like my wife does, or you've got a badly insulated house. So you've got to think about what you're doing. The other thing is that, you know, back in the old days, back in when I was a kid, we had one coal fire in one room in the house and everybody used to crowd in there rather than being in their separate bedrooms. You could go and sit in your bedroom on your own. There was nothing much to do. There was no television, no computer. Didn't even have a stereo up there, so there wasn't an awful lot you could do up in your bedroom. In the cold weather, we would all congregate around that coal fire and stay in that room until we had to go to bed, and then it was a question of just braving it and jumping into bed as quickly as you could. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, there's going to be a revisit to that. Let me know if you enjoy it, by the way, because some people may thrive on it. You know, the Wim Hof thing of embracing the cold and it being good for you. There are other things you can do. You can obviously draft proof your house. Because the bills are going to be so high, the payback period on these things is going to be a lot shorter. So it would be well worth looking now before the winter kicks in. Don't wait until the cold weather, but start looking around your house, thinking about what you can do to just make the house a little bit warmer. Now, years ago, we used to have a big curtain that we drew across our front door at night. It did have a great benefit on the very cold weather. We could draw that curtain across. It gave us an extra layer of dead air space, which was good insulation. So keeping your curtains drawn. If you've got south facing rooms and you've got sun coming in, it's a great idea to leave those curtains open during the day and get that warmth in, because it will heat the fabric of the building. But if you haven't got a south facing room, if you've got a north facing room, you may be better to just keep the curtains drawn all day, although it doesn't look very good. We've got to be practical in these things and say that it will cut down on the heat losses from the house. They're not going to make a huge difference, unfortunately. At some point, we've got to face the fact that it's going to cost us all a lot more to heat our homes than it does at the moment. But we're going to be bringing you tips and ideas of what you can do to save a bit of money, and hopefully, you know, the government's going to step in with a few more handouts, if you like. These are loans, by the way. At some point, somebody's going to have to pay them back. There's no magic bullet here. Face facts that fuel prices globally have gone up dramatically. So you want practical advice from us, and there's plenty of that around, but one thing you can do is to turn down the heat in the rooms you're not using. Now, at one point, people would have said, don't do this, don't zone the heating system off, leave it all heating because one room affects the heating of another room and so on. If you're going to run your temperatures low at say 50, then there might not be such a case for turning those rooms down that you don't use. But if you've got rooms, if you're lucky enough to have rooms in your house which you only use occasionally, then you can turn down the thermostat, the radiator if you like, in those rooms, and you will save money. Whenever you do something like that, you will save a certain amount of money. But if you are able to, if you've got a boiler, especially a combi boiler, because you can turn the flow temperature down on a combi boiler, just running the radiators cooler, but you can still leave the hot water running at its temperature, which would be 60 degrees centigrade, something like that. You need to run it at that kind of temperature at least once a week to overcome the problem of Legionella, as they call it. But other than that, you can afford to turn that flow temperature down. What you can do, by the way, is vary it. You know, if it's a cold day, turn it up a bit. If it's a mild day, turn it down a bit, and then maybe just delay the point where you switch that heating on in the evening. You know, if it's just an autumn evening or something like that, it's just a little bit chilly, grab that other jumper, grab that blanket or that throw or whatever you've got, and stick it over you while you're sitting on the sofa watching television. All those things, you know, they don't sound like a great way to live, quite honestly, but we've got to face the reality of this situation. We've got to come through it, because if people can't afford to pay their bills, they can't afford to eat, they can't afford to run their vehicles, there's going to be a lot of misery for a lot of people. Unfortunately, I'd love to come up with an answer of how we're going to escape this, but I think we've all got to grit our teeth, and obviously we've got to look after the elderly, make sure that they are protected. And one thing you can do, you can get these foil blankets, silver foil. If they're sitting near a fire, if you can put some kind of screen around the back of them that reflects the heat back into them and back towards the fire, that's a really great idea. We used to do this years ago. We used to have these standing screens that you put up, but if you could do that, if you can fashion something with a bit of silver foil on it, you'd be amazed at how much difference that can make. You know, if they're sitting in a room and they're sitting in the same position all day long, maybe watching the TV, it's really a good idea to concentrate the heat around the body rather than trying to heat the whole house. Now, I knew a guy years ago when I was doing emergency plumbing. I used to go out to him on a regular basis. He was a Scottish guy. Now, I'm not trying to stereotype Scottish people, but he was fairly careful with his money. But he also used to, like, when it snowed, he would put his kilt on and he would go romping, marching across the fields and everything. He loved to walk through the snow in his kilt. So you can tell he was a pretty tough guy, and he thought the idea of having heating on in a house was for sissies. You know, his wife quite liked the heating, I've got to say, but he was in charge, and he go, oh no, we don't need central heating, that's terrible for you. Lived to a ripe old age, by the way, this guy. But one consequence of him living like that, turning the heat off and you know, manning up, if you like, was that he got quite a number of burst pipes. So I would go out and I'd say to him, you know, you've got to do something. You've got to run a little bit of heat in this house because you're just getting burst pipes. But he thought it was more desirable to have me come out, fix the burst pipe, and then he could save a fortune on his heating. But he liked the cold, and if you like the cold, this is going to be a great year for you. I'm Roger Bisbee. Come back and see us soon. We will try to keep you updated on things and to help with a few energy saving ideas.